Since when did we provide, or anyone provide, nuance to a genocide? We've heard about 43,000 confirmed lives killed, but they predict that there's over 200,000 lives that have been killed by Israel. And yet we have heard nothing but weak and weasel words from the sitting current Labour government. The Muslim vote is a demonstration of the power that we have in our hands, that community has. And that basically is to say that we want to hold you accountable as a community. The Muslim vote is very important in allowing the community to see its strengths. The Muslim vote is important to basically affect outcomes. And it does that because it wants real representation. It wants genuine representation without being tied to party politics. The Labour Party absolutely should and must be punished. Do you know it was the Australian government that introduced more counter-terrorism legislation than any other government in the world? And that's fact. More than any other government in the world. Over 80 pieces of legislation on counter-terrorism. And so they haven't made it easy. And even under Labour, even under Liberal, they haven't made it easy for the Muslim community. And so what? You went for an outcome. You sought to do something. You and I don't control the outcome, but you try and affect change in how you can.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to TBN Studios. Today we have a very special guest with us, Sheikh Wesam Charkawi from Sydney. Sheikh Wesam, would you like to introduce yourself?
First and foremost, Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So, Wesam Charkawi from Sydney, born and raised in Australia, and alhamdulillah, it's an honor to be able to serve the Muslim community in whatever capacity we can, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to use us for His sake and not to replace us, and that's a really big thing, and it's an honor. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to continue to use us, inshallah, wherever we can.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. Would you like to tell us a bit about the Muslim vote, which I believe you're the founder of? Why did you decide that such an organization was needed for our Muslim community?
Sheikh, we are witnessing destruction on an unprecedented level. And since when did we provide, or anyone provide, nuance to a genocide? Since when did that happen? We've heard about 43,000 confirmed lives killed, but they predict that there's over 200,000 lives that have been killed by Israel. And yet we have heard nothing but weak and weasel words from the sitting current Labour government. Now, the Labour government says that they represent their constituents, yet when the constituents come to the party and they say, represent our voices, go to the dispatch box, condemn Israel, sanction Israel, expel the Israeli ambassador, call for an arms embargo. They say it's too difficult, it's too hard, we can't do it. It's a complex issue. What's so complex about it? You've got slaughter on mass scale. What's so difficult about standing for justice and holding people accountable? You have a blueprint in Ukraine. When Russia invaded Ukraine, you took those very same steps on Russia that you're now being asked to take on Israel. Why haven't you done that? The Muslim vote is a demonstration of the power that we have in our hands, that community has. And that basically is to say that we want to hold you accountable as a community. We want to hold the government accountable as a community. If you fail to represent on an inner circumstance that we want real and genuine representation on, and you call party politics, then you don't have the honor of speaking for your community once more. The Muslim vote is about mobilizing the Muslim community to be able to not only educate, but to allow the people of the community to see that they actually can come together, can unify, and can hold others accountable. There is power that they have, and we have that at the moment, and we can change the powers that be and the social or the status quo in terms of the current makeup of government. So the Muslim vote is very important in allowing the community to see its strengths. The Muslim vote is important in driving this initiative to basically affect outcomes. And it does that because it wants real representation. It wants genuine representation without being tied to party politics, without any strings attached. And so this is part and parcel of what the Muslim vote seeks to do, to mobilize the Muslim community, to educate the Muslim community, and to effectively change the outcomes so our voices are never ever taken for granted again in regards to Gaza and Palestine, but also on local issues.
Yes. Why do you think our politicians, including the Prime Minister, they seem to be very reluctant to condemn Israel when the whole world sees it as a genocide? And you have the recent ICC, warrant out for the arrest of Netanyahu and Gallant and Daif. Why is it that our politicians seem to be gagged when it comes to speaking about Israel, speaking against Israel?
You'd have to ask the politicians why they chose to remain silent. I don't speak on their behalf. But one thing I can tell you is this is a situation where you cannot claim or maintain neutrality. You cannot stand on the fence, and you cannot say, well, we choose not to get involved or try and walk both sides of the aisle. That doesn't work here. You've got an active genocide. You've got a situation that has been deemed apartheid, war crimes, daily humiliation, thousands and thousands and thousands upon deaths, right? Millions of people displaced, over 76 years of occupation. You have to take a principle, a decision to stand on the side of justice. And the ICJ has ruled clearly what it has ruled in terms of a plausible genocide. We have now arrest warrants that have been issued by the ICC, and yet we still have a government that says Israel has a right to defend itself. Even to date, they would still maintain that Israel has a right to defend itself. People have to understand, a wrong is a wrong. You cannot stay silent to a wrong. You cannot say, I choose to stay away from this. And by doing that, are you not enabling then the perpetrator to continue their crimes? And so the sentiment, of course, is one of outrage, absolute outrage, that you stood idly by and did nothing and enabled and were complicit in what the Israeli government did in perpetuating their crimes against the Palestinian people. And so it's not good enough, absolutely nowhere good enough. And they'll forever be remembered for the stance that they took.
I guess what I was trying to ask is the influence of powerful lobbies, maybe corporate companies, that as a result of their influence, our politicians have their hands tied, that they can't even, they are acting not in the interest of Australia, but the interest of a foreign power. I don't think the average Australian would agree with Russia or China being able to influence our politicians. But yet we seem to see, with regards to one particular country, they have a strong influence over our politics.
There's no question that there are lobby groups at play, and there's no question that there are groups of influence that try and influence the government to act a particular way or to say particular things the way that they want. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you have to take a position on justice. You have to take that position where it demands so, and this is where it is demanded. You called it on Ukraine when they were invaded by Russia. You sanctioned Russia. You expelled the Russian ambassador. You did it on Russia. And now we called for the same thing to be done on Israel. So it's not good enough to say that there are lobby groups. It's not good enough to say that there are powerful factions at play. That's not good enough when it comes to the killing of innocent people. That's not good enough when it comes to a genocide. That's not good enough when you try and speak on the rights of women, but you don't speak up for the Palestinian women who are being maimed and raped and killed by the Israeli Defense Force. It's not good enough that you speak about the rights of children, yet you can't speak on behalf of the children that are being killed in Gaza and Palestine. How can we take you seriously? You come up to speak on the rights of women and children, Yet you said nothing about the over 10,000, 15,000 women and children who've been killed and raped and maimed in Gaza and Palestine. So to say that there are powerful factions at play, what does that mean? That means nothing. That means nothing. You are a government in charge. You have a responsibility. You have a responsibility first and foremost to uphold these aspects of justice, these aspects of holding others accountable. And ultimately, you have to stand for something. So what you've demonstrated is that you can be bought. You demonstrated that you can be silenced. You've demonstrated that these powerful factions can hold you at bay. Well, if that's the case, then you shouldn't be in that position, because we don't want people in that position. We want people who can genuinely speak for the issues that matter, especially when it comes to genocide. And so you can't play your party politics when you say that we're here to represent our constituents, yet you don't. Why should you be there once more?
What would you say to people who are adverse to the fact that Muslims or any faith-based party would get involved in politics?
Well, the Muslim vote is not a political party, and it doesn't intend to become one. That doesn't say we aren't led by our faith. Of course, we're proud of that. There's no issue in that whatsoever. Having said all of that, isn't it interesting that the moment that people from the community, yes, who have Muslim background, who says that we want to mobilize the Muslim community on issues that affect us and impact us, that there's an immediate negative framing of the boogie monster type of framing to come and infiltrate politics, and somehow, they're sinister in their intentions. They're trying to do what?
The Islamification of Australia.
The Islamification of Australia. And so this fear-mongering, because you decided to, hey, let's have a conversation and see if we can unify on this particular thing to affect issues that matter to us, which I think everybody and every group and every community and organization, they do when it comes to politics. And so I don't want to start quoting you what all different groups around Australia do in that regard, but there are many that do the same thing. I mean, people have interests, and we have interests, and there's nothing wrong with coming together to say, well, these are our interests, and we want these addressed. And is this a mode or a means of addressing them? And so it was so interesting to see the negative framing around this discourse that spread like wildfire. It was like this, these people operating in the shadows and coming to try and do what? It's unfortunate that, this is a type of construct that people want to sort of set as the base to fearmonger or further marginalize the Muslim community. But that's exactly what it did.
So the Muslim vote, do they have any preference to a particular party? Do they endorse any particular party?
So the Muslim vote is endorsing independence. And independents who can speak for the values and who can speak for the issues that are of concern to the community, that represent justice, that represent accountability, that represent integrity, that represent good for the real, genuine good for the community, both here in Australia and internationally. And so this approach of supporting and endorsing independence is definitely a method and an approach that the Muslim vote will be taking. In terms of the Labor Party absolutely should and must be punished. Party politics has become supreme and dominant to the voices of your constituents. And if you turn around and you say, well, that's just how it is, we vote along party lines, well, make that clear. So your constituents understand that that they put you there, but you're choosing how to represent them. So we know what's good for you, in contrast to the community saying, we want you to represent on these issues. But you're like, no, we know what's best for you, and we'll represent the way that we think that you should be represented. Well, we don't want to hold to that. And we're not going to hold to that any longer. And that's where an independent voice breaks free of the shackles of party lines and can speak genuinely for community.
What guarantee can you give in trying to punish the Labor Party that they will ultimately lose government and will be replaced by another government, the Dutton government, that may not be favorable for the Gaza issue?
Look, the model suggests that you won't have a liberal government come in or win the next election. And that the model suggests that you have a minority Labour government. That's what it suggests. You have to come back to what the objective is. And what's the objective? That the Muslim vote or Muslim votes matter, right? Both grassroots organizations seeking to mobilize the Muslim community. It was through them that you made it happen one way or another. At the moment, no one is taking the Muslim community seriously, assuming that the government holds all the power and that whatever they do, that they'll continue to secure their votes. Do you know it was the Australian government that introduced more counter-terrorism legislation than any other government in the world? I'll say that again, and that's fact. More than any other government in the world, over 80 pieces of legislation on counter-terrorism. And so they haven't made it easy, and even under Labour, even under Liberal, they haven't made it easy for the Muslim community. And so what? If somebody comes in, I mean, imagine this, what's the worst that they can do? Okay, we know that they can make it tougher on these certain things and these certain issues, of course. But you compare that to a child living in Gaza and Palestine. I really want to say to the viewers, I want you to think about this. You went for an outcome. You sought to do something. You and I don't control the outcome, but you try and affect change in how you can. So in the end, what's this fear-mongering? Let me pose this question. Is there a lesser of two evils when it comes to a genocide? Is there really a lesser of two evils to say, I'm going to go with Labour because they're the lesser of two evils because of the Liberal? What would you ever achieve through that? You're basically telling Labour, do your worst, we'll always have your back because you are the lesser of the two evils. No, we have to take a stand. We have to make a decision. Think about your brothers and sisters, what they're going through. Think about the people of Palestine and Gaza, what they're going through. Think about the difficulties on a daily basis. Think about what they're eating, how they're sleeping, how they're still buried beneath rubble, how they've lost their family members whole, generations whole. That pales in significance when you think about what they're going through.
You mentioned that the Australian government introduced more counter-terrorism laws than any other country. Why is that a bad thing? Wouldn't that keep our country safer?
Absolutely not. Look, the government has got it wrong on counter and violent extremism. The government assumes, and you look at their policy, the government has pigeonholed the whole issue of terrorism to Islam. It said Islam is responsible for everything. And every time something happened, the government would come and they would seek out somebody from the Muslim community to come and condemn, or call upon social cohesion. And their social cohesion was when Muslims are silent, Muslims are quiet, Muslims say nothing. And when Muslims ever spoke out, no, you're agitating social cohesion here. Be quiet and do nothing and say nothing. Social cohesion, the term was coined under John Howard. And it's a very, very loaded, dirty word. And people will criticize and say, why do you say social cohesion is a dirty word? And that's not because as Muslims, we don't love social connectedness. We love social connectedness. We love our neighbors. We love the differences. People have different backgrounds, faiths, speak different languages, come from different parts of the world. We love that. We love that. But your term of social cohesion is weaponized. You've weaponized the word social cohesion for something very specific. And that's when Muslims should say nothing, be nothing, do nothing, and only operate according to the framework that you want, which is to come forward and condemn. We'll no longer play your games. We're sick and tired of your lies. And so ultimately, no, the legislation that the government has put in on violent extremism or counter-violent extremism issues or to try and tackle issues around this, they've actually led to innocent people being incarcerated. A 13-year-old boy, right, being courted by the Australian Federal Police who was autistic, an autistic boy. And I'm following up a case in New South Wales where a person who works for a particular agency, I'm yet to verify the particular agency, but I know the agency, who also groomed a young man only to charge that person with terrorism-related offenses. So I'm yet to confirm, but I'm hearing very strongly from the social worker and from the family who are saying this is exactly how it happened. This person worked for this particular department and was caught in and grooming my young child to do A, B, C, D. So we have all these pieces of legislation which has seen innocent people land in jail, has seen the issue of violent extremism pigeonholed to Islam. And the data says that religion has nothing to do with violent extremism. And so they're not listening to the literature. They're not taking heed of what the literature states. And so it's something which is very ideologically driven. And that fits very neatly in a politician seeking power or standing before the cameras alongside the commissioner of the AFP or New South Wales Police Commissioner and speaking to issues of terrorism. But yet when we see the contrast in New South Wales where a potential bomb was put on a car and there was a note that was left on that bomb. It was actually a petrol canister that was put on a bomb that had a rag hanging from its mouth, and a particular house had a Palestinian flag and there was a message left. That's the fitting definition of terrorism. Yet we didn't see that in the media. We didn't see the Prime Minister stand up and say anything about it. We didn't see Chris Minns, the New South Wales Premier, come up and say anything about it. It was just flagged as some ordinary crime and it passed beneath the radar and there was nothing more to say about it. Had that been a household where the occupant of that household was, let's say, Jewish, and they had an Israeli flag, and the same thing happened, what would you have seen in the media? What reports would you have had?
It would have been outrage, it would have been declared.
Terrorism would have been declared immediately. And so we see this dichotomy, we see this clear contrast between being Muslim and being targeted, and yet the authorities treat it very differently to how you would be otherwise.
What would you say to people, Muslims, who say that, look, there's more than just the Gaza issue when it comes to voting? Is it just that we have only one issue in our mind? Or are there any other issues?
Of course, we have many issues that we want addressed, but we need people that can be able and who are able to address the issues of the community. So basically, it's trying to say this is a means or a mode to try and affect change. And there are many means and there are many modes, and people are free to take those modes to try and affect good, positive change. And this is one of those. So the real change can be affected by engagement. But the idea or objective is not engagement for engagement's sake or because of there's some type of desire for the political realm that we have. No, absolutely not. But it's rather to affect change. It's a means of bringing about change on issues that affect us. That's what it's about.
Jazakumullah khairan, Sheikh Wesam. It was a pleasure to have you here, coming from Sydney. We hope you come again.
Thank you very much for having me, and it was an honor to be here and to
Jazakumullah.
speak with you and with the residents of Perth.
Hayyakumullah. Barakallah.